Angela was a hard-working nurse and a single mother. Her days were always busy, but she made sure to spend quality time with her daughter, Maya, whenever she could. On this particular sunny afternoon, Angela decided to take Maya to the grocery store to pick up some essentials. Maya, an energetic and curious 8-year-old, was excited because Angela had promised her they'd bake cookies together after their errands. As they walked through the store aisles, Angela noticed a police officer near the entrance. He seemed restless, pacing back and forth with an intense look on his face. Angela thought nothing of it. She smiled politely as she walked past, holding Maya's hand. The officer didn't smile back. They finished shopping quickly. Angela knew Maya was eager to get home and start baking. They loaded the groceries into their car, laughing as Maya tried to juggle a bag of flour. Angela loved seeing her daughter so happy. It made her feel like all the hard work she did was worth it. As Angela got into the driver's seat, she realized a police car was parked behind her, blocking her from backing out. She looked around and saw the same officer from earlier standing nearby, talking to someone. She decided to wait a moment, thinking he'd notice her, and move the car. Minutes passed, but the officer didn't budge. Angela tapped the horn gently, hoping to get his attention without seeming rude. The sound startled Maya, who asked, "Mom, is everything okay?" Angela smiled and reassured her daughter. "It's fine, sweetie. We're just waiting for the car behind us to move." The officer finally looked in their direction. Angela waved politely and pointed to the squad car, signaling that she needed to leave. Instead of responding kindly, the officer frowned and walked toward their car. Angela rolled down her window, still calm and composed. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. The officer, whose name tag read Burke, leaned down. "What's the rush?" he asked, his tone sharp. Angela blinked, surprised by his response. "Oh, no rush, officer. It's just that your car is blocking mine, and I need to back out." Burke's expression didn't soften. "Maybe you should learn to wait," he snapped. Angela felt a pang of frustration, but kept her tone steady. "I've been waiting for a while. I just need to get home with my daughter. I'd appreciate it if you could move your car." Maya, sensing the tension, stayed quiet but held tightly onto her mother's hand. The officer stepped back and crossed his arms, making no effort to move his car. "People like you are always in a hurry, aren't you?" he said coldly. Angela's heart sank. She had dealt with comments like this before, but hearing it in front of her daughter made it worse. She took a deep breath, refusing to let her emotions take over. "Please, officer," she said firmly but kindly. "We just want to go home." Before the conversation could continue, a small group of shoppers began to notice the scene. Some paused to watch, while others whispered among themselves. Angela felt a knot form in her stomach, realizing this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. Maya looked up at her mom, her eyes wide with concern. Angela squeezed her hand and whispered, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here." But deep down, Angela wasn't so sure everything would be okay. Angela kept her composure as Officer Burke stood his ground, his arms crossed and his expression unyielding. Maya shifted nervously in her seat, her small hand clutching Angela's tightly. Angela knew she had to stay calm for her daughter's sake, even though her frustration was beginning to build. "Officer," Angela began again, her voice steady, "I understand you're busy, but my daughter and I need to get home. Could you please move your car?" Burke smirked and leaned closer to the car window. "Busy? I'm doing my job, ma'am. Maybe you should learn a little patience." Angela's chest tightened. She could feel the eyes of the small crowd gathering around them. A woman nearby took out her phone and began recording the interaction. Angela noticed but decided to focus on the situation at hand. Her goal was simple: to get home safely with Maya. "Mommy," Maya whispered, tugging at Angela's sleeve. "Why is he being so mean?" Angela's heart ached at her daughter's words. She glanced down at her and smiled softly. "It's okay, Maya. Sometimes people just have bad days. We're going to be okay. But Burke wasn't backing down. Instead, he straightened up and took a step back, glaring at Angela as if she had done something wrong. Maybe you shouldn't park where you can't leave so easily, he said with a mocking tone. Angela's patience was wearing thin, but she refused to let anger take over. She spoke firmly, her voice unwavering. Officer, I parked in a legal spot. I'm not asking for much, just for you to move your car so my daughter and I can leave. Burke shook his head and began pacing in front of their car, as if to make a point. The crowd continued to grow, and Angela could hear murmurs among the bystanders. A man in the group spoke up, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Why is he making such a big deal? She's just trying to leave. Burke's head snapped toward the man, and his expression darkened. Mind your own business, he barked. The man raised his hands in surrender, but the tension in the air was palpable. Angela realized that this wasn't just about her anymore. The situation was escalating, and she had to think carefully about her next move. She reached for her phone and dialed 911, her hands trembling slightly. 911. What's your emergency? The operator asked. Yes, hello, Angela said, her voice calm but firm. I'm at the grocery store parking lot, and there's a police officer here who is refusing to let me leave. He's blocking my car and being aggressive. I have my daughter with me, and I need assistance. Burke's eyes narrowed as he saw Angela on the phone. What are you doing? He demanded, stepping closer to the car. I'm calling for help, Angela replied. You're making this situation more difficult than it needs to be. The woman recording the scene spoke up loudly. I'm getting all of this on video. You can't treat people this way. Burke glanced at the phone in her hand, his jaw tightening. The growing crowd, the recording, and Angela's calm determination were starting to corner him. For a moment, it seemed like he might back off, but then he stepped forward again, his expression harder than before. Angela kept her head high, meeting his glare. She wasn't going to let fear win. This wasn't just about her. It was about showing Maya that standing up for what's right matters, no matter how hard it is. As the sirens of another police car sounded in the distance, Angela felt a glimmer of hope. Help was on the way. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, and Angela felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She held Maya's hand tightly, reassuring her daughter that everything would be okay. Maya looked up at her mother with wide eyes, clearly frightened but trusting Angela to keep her safe. The crowd in the parking lot grew larger as more people stopped to see what was happening. Some were recording on their phones, while others whispered among themselves. The tension was thick, and Angela could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her. She stayed calm, knowing that losing her temper would only make things worse. As another police car pulled into the lot, Burke's expression turned from annoyance to frustration. Two officers stepped out of the car, their faces showing confusion as they approached the scene. One of them, a tall woman with a calm demeanor, introduced herself as Officer Ramirez. Ma'am, I'm Officer Ramirez, she said, addressing Angela with a polite but serious tone. Can you tell me what's going on here? Angela nodded, her voice steady despite the pressure of the moment. Officer Ramirez, I was trying to leave the parking lot with my daughter when Officer Burke blocked my car. I've asked him several times to move, but he's refused. He's been aggressive, and I had no choice but to call for help. Ramirez turned to Burke, her eyebrows raised. Is this true, Burke? Why are you blocking her car? Burke crossed his arms defensively. She was being disrespectful, he muttered. I was just trying to teach her a lesson about patience. Ramirez's expression hardened. Teaching lessons isn't our job, Burke. We're here to serve and protect. The crowd murmured in agreement, and the woman recording spoke up again. It's all on video. He's been out of line since the beginning. Burke glared at the woman, his frustration evident. Angela could see the tension in his posture and braced herself for what might come next. She glanced at Maya, who was watching everything unfold with wide eyes. Angela squeezed her hand gently and whispered, "Stay strong, baby. We're almost through this." Before Ramirez could respond further, Burke's temper flared. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, stepping toward Angela's car. "People like her think they can do whatever they want. Well, not on my watch." His words shocked the crowd, and Angela's heart pounded. She couldn't believe he was escalating the situation even with other officers present. Ramirez quickly stepped in, placing herself between Burke and Angela's car. "That's enough, Burke," Ramirez said firmly. "You're out of line." Burke ignored her, his focus still on Angela. In a moment that felt like it happened in slow motion, he reached forward and slapped Angela's car window with enough force to startle everyone. Maya let out a small cry, and Angela instinctively shielded her daughter. The crowd gasped, and several people shouted in protest. Ramirez grabbed Burke by the arm, her voice sharp. "Step back, Burke. Now." Angela's hands trembled, but she refused to let fear take over. "I won't let this break me," she thought, her resolve strengthening. She held Maya close and met Burke's glare with calm defiance. As the situation spiraled further, Angela knew this wasn't over. But she also knew she had the truth and the support of the community on her side. This was no longer just about her. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter how difficult it might be. Angela held Maya close, her heart racing as the tension in the parking lot reached its peak. Officer Ramirez remained between Burke and Angela's car, her voice firm as she ordered Burke to back off. The crowd, now fully invested in the situation, grew louder in their support for Angela. "Someone needs to stop him," a man shouted from the crowd. "This isn't right," another woman said, shaking her head. The bystanders' outrage gave Angela a glimmer of hope that she wasn't alone in this. Burke stepped back reluctantly, his face red with anger. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath. "She's making a scene." Ramirez turned to face him, her tone sharp. "You're the one making the scene, Burke. This is not how we're trained to handle situations. Step aside, or I'll have no choice but to report you." Angela admired Ramirez's composure. She was firm but professional, a clear contrast to Burke's behavior. Ramirez then turned to Angela, her voice softer now. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry for what you've experienced today. Are you and your daughter okay?" Angela nodded, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "We're fine, Officer Ramirez. I just want to leave safely with my daughter." Maya, still clutching Angela's hand, whispered, "Mommy, is it over now?" Her innocent voice broke Angela's heart, but she smiled and reassured her daughter. "Almost, sweetheart. We're almost done." Ramirez addressed the crowd, thanking them for their patience and asking them to remain calm. "We're handling the situation," she said firmly. "Please allow us to do our job." The woman recording stepped forward slightly. "I have everything on video," she said. "This isn't right, and people need to know." Ramirez nodded. "Thank you for documenting this. It might be helpful if a formal investigation is needed." Meanwhile, Burke stood to the side, clearly frustrated but saying nothing. Angela could feel his glare on her, but she refused to look away. Instead, she focused on Ramirez, grateful for her professionalism. As Ramirez moved to speak with Burke privately, another officer approached Angela's car. He introduced himself as Officer Daniels and reassured her that she was safe. "We'll make sure you and your daughter get home," he said kindly. Angela felt a wave of relief. "Thank you," she said sincerely. Before she could start her car, Ramirez returned. "Ma'am, you're free to leave now," she said. "If you'd like to file a formal complaint against Officer Burke, we'll guide you through the process." Angela took a deep breath, her determination growing. "I think I will," she said, "not just for me but for my daughter and everyone who's been through something like this." The crowd clapped and cheered as Angela slowly backed out of the parking spot. Maya waved shyly at some of the supportive bystanders. her small smile showing a bit of relief. Angela knew they had a long road ahead, but she felt stronger knowing she wasn't alone in this fight. As they drove away, Maya asked, "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" Angela smiled, her voice filled with love and determination. "Yes, Maya, we're going to be okay because we're standing up for what's right. Always remember that." And in that moment, Angela realized this was more than just a confrontation. It was a turning point, a chance to stand tall and fight for justice. The day after the incident, Angela woke up feeling a mix of emotions. She was relieved that she and Maya were safe, but the encounter with Officer Burke replayed in her mind. She glanced at Maya, who was still sleeping peacefully, and resolved to turn this experience into something meaningful, not just for herself, but for her daughter and others like them. After dropping Maya off at school, Angela received a call from a woman named Karen, who introduced herself as a community organizer. "Hi, Angela," Karen began warmly. "I saw the video of what happened yesterday. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. We want to support you." Angela was surprised. "Support me? How?" Karen explained that many people in the community were outraged by the video and wanted to hold a peaceful rally to demand accountability and justice. "We need voices like yours, Angela," Karen said. "If you're comfortable, we'd love for you to join us and share your story." Angela hesitated. She wasn't used to public speaking and didn't consider herself an activist. But the thought of making a difference for Maya and others gave her courage. "Okay," Angela said after a moment. "I'll do it." That afternoon, Angela picked up Maya from school and told her about the rally. Maya's eyes widened. "You're going to talk in front of people, Mommy?" she asked, impressed. Angela smiled and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. Sometimes we have to speak up when things aren't right." The next day, Angela arrived at the rally, held in the park near the grocery store where the incident happened. To her surprise, a large crowd had gathered. People held signs with messages like, "Justice for Angela," and "Stop abuse of power." There were young and old, people of different backgrounds, and even children holding hands with their parents. Karen greeted Angela warmly and introduced her to Jordan, a young lawyer who had volunteered to help Angela navigate the legal process. "Angela, I'm here to support you in any way I can," Jordan said. "We need to make sure Officer Burke is held accountable." Angela felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I don't know much about the law, but I know this isn't right." As the rally began, Karen spoke first, addressing the crowd with passion and purpose. Then she introduced Angela. Angela's heart raced as she stepped up to the microphone. She glanced at the crowd, her hands trembling slightly. But then she saw Maya, standing near the front with Karen, her eyes filled with pride. Angela took a deep breath and began. "Yesterday, my daughter and I experienced something that no one should ever have to face. But I'm here today because of all of you. Your support means everything to me." She went on to share her story, emphasizing the importance of standing up against injustice. The crowd cheered and clapped, their energy giving Angela strength. By the time she finished, her voice was steady, and she felt a new sense of confidence. After the rally, Angela spoke with Jordan about filing a formal complaint and possibly pursuing legal action. "I want to do this," Angela said firmly. "Not just for me, but for Maya, and for everyone who's ever felt powerless." As Angela walked home with Maya, hand in hand, she felt a spark of hope. The road ahead might be long, but she wasn't walking it alone. Her community was behind her, and together, they were ready to stand up for what was right. Weeks passed, and Angela's life became a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and preparations. Jordan, the young lawyer who had offered to help, worked tirelessly on Angela's case. He explained the legal process clearly and patiently, making sure Angela understood every step. Together, they were building a strong case against Officer Burke, supported by witness testimonies and the video evidence from the parking lot. Maya watched her mom with admiration during this time. "You're so brave, Mommy," she said one evening while they were baking cookies. Angela smiled and hugged her daughter. "I'm brave because of you, sweetheart. You remind me every day why it's important to stand up for what's right." Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. Angela dressed in her best outfit, her nerves a mix of anxiety and determination. Maya stayed home with a family friend, and Angela promised to tell her everything when she returned. As Angela and Jordan walked into the courtroom, she was greeted by familiar faces. Members of her community, including Karen and several others who had attended the rally, were there to support her. Inside the courtroom, Officer Burke sat with his lawyer, looking stern and unrepentant. Angela's heart raced as she took her seat. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Jordan was confident and well prepared. He presented the video evidence, which clearly showed Burke's behavior. Witnesses from the parking lot testified, describing how Angela had remained calm and respectful while Burke escalated the situation. The woman who had recorded the video spoke passionately, emphasizing that Angela had done nothing to provoke Burke's actions. As Angela watched, she felt a sense of pride in her community. These people didn't have to stand up for her, but they chose to. Their courage gave her strength. When it was Burke's turn to speak, his lawyer tried to paint a different picture. He claimed that Burke had been under stress and that Angela had been difficult, but the evidence was too strong to ignore. The video showed Angela's calm demeanor and Burke's aggressive behavior. The judge watched the footage carefully, her expression serious. Angela was called to the stand to share her side of the story. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke, but her voice was steady. She recounted the events of that day, explaining how she had remained polite despite Burke's hostility. She also spoke about the impact it had on Maya. "My daughter was scared," Angela said, her voice breaking slightly. "No child should have to witness something like that." As she finished, Angela looked directly at the judge. "I'm not here for revenge," she said. "I'm here because I believe in justice. What happened to me and my daughter wasn't right, and it shouldn't happen to anyone else." The courtroom was silent as Angela stepped down. She returned to her seat, her head held high. She had spoken her truth, and now it was up to the judge to decide. The hearing ended for the day, and Angela walked out of the courtroom surrounded by her supporters. As they stepped into the fresh air, Karen placed a hand on Angela's shoulder. "You were amazing in there," she said. Angela smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. While the outcome was still uncertain, Angela knew one thing for sure. She had done everything she could to fight for justice, not just for herself but for everyone watching. And that was something to be proud of. The courtroom was packed on the second day of the hearing. Angela sat next to Jordan, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She glanced around the room and saw familiar faces from the community who had come to support her. Their presence gave her courage, even as she prepared to face what was to come. The proceedings began, and Jordan stood to call his next witness, a former colleague of Officer Burke. The man, Officer Simmons, hesitated as he took the stand, but his expression showed a sense of duty. Jordan began his questioning carefully. "Officer Simmons, how long have you worked with Officer Burke?" 7 years, Simmons replied. "And in those 7 years, have you observed any behavior from Officer Burke that raised concerns?" Simmons shifted uncomfortably, but eventually nodded. "Yes, I have. There were times when Burke acted unprofessionally, especially toward certain members of the community." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Angela leaned forward, listening intently. Simmons continued, explaining that Burke had received multiple complaints in the past for his behavior, but they were often dismissed without proper investigation. "Why do you think these complaints were ignored?" Jordan pressed. Simmons hesitated before answering. "Because he's been with the department a long time, and some people in leadership overlooked his actions." Angela's stomach churned. It was painful to hear, but it confirmed what she had suspected. Her experience wasn't an isolated incident. The next piece of evidence was a set of internal reports that Jordan had obtained. These reports documented several instances where Burke had been accused of similar conduct, though none had resulted in significant consequences. The judge's expression grew stern as she reviewed the evidence. When it was time for Burke to testify, his demeanor shifted. He was defensive, attempting to justify his actions. "I was under a lot of stress that day," he said. "I didn't mean to upset anyone. I was just trying to do my job." Jordan didn't let up. "Officer Burke, do you believe it's part of your job to block someone's car and intimidate them in front of their child?" Burke avoided eye contact, mumbling, "It wasn't like that." The video evidence and witness testimonies told a different story. The courtroom watched as Jordan played the video once more, highlighting Angela's calm behavior and Burke's aggressive actions. Angela felt a wave of relief as the truth played out before everyone. As the day drew to a close, the judge addressed both sides. "This case has brought to light serious issues, not just about this incident, but about accountability within law enforcement," she said. "I will take everything presented today into careful consideration before making my decision." Angela left the courtroom feeling a mix of exhaustion and hope. The truth was out, and she had done everything in her power to stand up for herself and Maya. Outside, she was greeted by the supportive crowd once again. Karen gave her a hug. "You've been incredible through all of this, Angela. No matter what happens, you've already made a difference." Angela looked at Maya, who was waiting with a family friend nearby. Maya ran up to her and hugged her tightly. "Mommy, did we win?" she asked innocently. Angela smiled and kissed her daughter's forehead. "We're not done yet, sweetheart, but no matter what, we've done something important, and that's what matters most." As Angela walked away with Maya's hand in hers, she felt a sense of peace. The battle wasn't over, but she knew she had the strength to see it through. The courtroom was silent as everyone waited for the judge to deliver her verdict. Angela sat at the table next to Jordan, her hands clasped tightly together. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she glanced over at Maya, who was seated with Karen in the back of the room. Maya gave her a small, reassuring wave, and Angela felt a rush of courage. The judge cleared her throat, her expression serious but composed. After reviewing all the evidence, including video footage, witness testimonies, and internal reports, it is clear that Officer Burke acted inappropriately and outside the scope of his duties. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Burke shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his lawyer whispering something to him. Angela sat up straighter, listening carefully to every word. The judge continued, her voice firm. "Officer Burke's actions demonstrated not only poor judgment, but also a disregard for the responsibilities entrusted to him as a law enforcement officer. It is the court's decision that Officer Burke be held accountable for his actions. He will face suspension without pay, mandatory sensitivity training, and community service. Additionally, the department will be required to conduct a full review of its handling of complaints and implement stricter accountability measures." The room erupted in a mix of quiet cheers and murmurs of approval. Angela felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't just about Burke being held accountable. It was also about the promise of change within the system. The judge then turned her attention to Angela. "Ms. Carter, your courage in bringing this matter to light is commendable. It is through the bravery of individuals like you that systemic issues are addressed and improved." Angela's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of relief and pride. She nodded at the judge, grateful for her words. As the session ended, Angela stood, and the community members who had supported her rushed to congratulate her. Karen gave Angela a tight hug. "You did it, Angela. This is a victory for all of us." Jordan smiled, shaking her hand. "You were incredible throughout this process. Your strength and composure made all the difference." Maya ran up to her mother, wrapping her arms around her waist. "Mommy, we won," she exclaimed, her face glowing with excitement. Angela knelt down and held Maya close. "Yes, sweetheart, we did, and it's all because we stood up for what was right." Outside the courthouse, a small group of reporters had gathered. Angela hesitated, unsure if she wanted to speak, but Jordan encouraged her. "This is your moment, Angela. Share your story. It can inspire others." With Maya by her side, Angela addressed the reporters. She spoke about the importance of accountability, fairness, and standing up against injustice. Her words were heartfelt, and as she spoke, she felt the weight of the past weeks lift from her shoulders. By the time she finished, Angela felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. The fight had been hard, but it was worth it. She looked at Maya, who was beaming with pride, and knew this moment would shape both of their futures. As they walked away, Angela felt hope for the first time in weeks. The battle was over, but the impact of their actions would last a lifetime. This wasn't just her victory. It was a step forward for everyone who believed in justice. A week after the courtroom verdict, Angela sat at her kitchen table with Maya, going over a homework assignment. The house was peaceful, filled with the smell of freshly baked cookies. Maya giggled as Angela tried to help her solve a tricky math problem. It was a small moment, but it felt huge to Angela, a sign that life was finally returning to normal. As Angela sipped her tea, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Karen. "Angela, the community center wants to invite you to speak at an event next month about standing up for justice. They think your story can inspire others." Angela smiled as she read the message. A few weeks ago, she would have hesitated, unsure if she had the strength to keep speaking out. But now, after everything she'd been through, she felt ready to use her voice to help others. She typed back a quick reply. "I'd be honored to speak." That evening, Angela tucked Maya into bed and kissed her forehead. "Good night, sweet girl," she said softly. "Good night, Mommy," Maya replied, snuggling into her pillow. "You're my hero." Angela's heart swelled with emotion. She left the room quietly, her daughter's words echoing in her mind. Being Maya's hero was the greatest accomplishment of her life. The next day, Angela went to meet Jordan at his office to finalize the legal settlement from her case. The department's review of Officer Burke's conduct had led to deeper changes. New policies were being put in place to ensure that complaints were taken seriously, and training programs were being introduced for officers to better serve the community. "Angela, you've done more than win a case," Jordan said as they wrapped up their meeting. "You've sparked change in this town. That's something to be proud of." Angela nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I just wanted to make sure what happened to me wouldn't happen to anyone else." As she walked out of the office, Angela felt lighter. The settlement money would help secure Maya's future and allow Angela to focus on causes close to her heart. She had already decided to use part of it to fund community programs that supported fairness and equality. In the weeks that followed, Angela spoke at several events, sharing her story and encouraging others to stand up for what was right. Each time, she saw the impact her words had on others. People approached her afterward to thank her for her bravery, telling her how her actions had inspired them to make changes in their own lives. Maya often accompanied her to these events, beaming with pride as she watched her mother speak. Angela noticed how Maya's confidence grew, and she knew these experiences were shaping her daughter into someone who would always stand for what was right. One afternoon, as Angela and Maya walked through the park, Maya pointed to a group of kids playing nearby. "Mommy, one day I want to help people too, just like you." Angela knelt down and hugged her tightly. "You already do, Maya, and I know you're going to do amazing things." As they walked hand in hand, Angela felt a sense of peace and purpose. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been transformative. She and Maya had come out stronger, and their bond was unshakable. Together, they were ready to face whatever the future held, knowing they had the courage to make a difference. This was their new beginning, a life built on hope, resilience, and the power of standing up for what's right.